Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is definitely a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Hiring for integrity. Actually, there was a recent study that just came out. Just while we wait for everybody, I'll kind of let me pull it up here because it just came out and it was pretty interesting. I'll read you the post that these folks, this folks wrote, kind of a commentary on it. Pretty cool here. So let's see. So Jason Pfeiffer, he's the editor in chief for I think it's Entrepreneur Magazine, and so I mean he's a pretty big time thought leader in just all things business, really. And I follow him on LinkedIn, and he reposted this scientific journal article that these folks had written from the University of Iowa, and they posted and they looked at, and they basically said the study found that mega active, go hard or go home types were allergic to office politics, resource scarcity, red tape, and lack of autonomy and role confusion. The slackers, those performers who were strangely cool with the whole circus of office dysfunction, right? And so I have always related that back to integrity, right? People with low integrity, they engage in office politics, gossip. In this case, when we start talking about frontline workers, sometimes that's drug abuse, theft. In white collar workers or office workers, theft comes in the form of kind of time theft or uh, not doing your job in full capacity, all the way down to like fraud type stuff, right? So I don't know. There's kind of like a whole bunch of different areas where this comes out, but yeah, this is kind of a empirical study that was done, and basically found that good people don't like people with poor integrity, poor attitudes, problem generators, as I like to call them, right? So and they leave those organizations. And so, yeah, I don't know. Thought it was kind of interesting, kind of relates back, but okay. Well, I think a couple of minutes past the hour, so we'll get the true party started, I think. Do just kind of a quick introduction. And so my name is Fletcher Winbug. So I'm the CEO of Discovered. We own the IntegrityFirst product. We have a whole suite of like 30 plus different hiring assessments. Many of them are attitude and integrity focused. And then we have a whole suite of talent attraction, talent assessment, talent evaluation. So full kind of performance hiring platform. I've literally spent my whole life thinking about hiring and getting the right people on the bus and the impact that can make inside of an organization. And Gary and I became friends last summer as we picked up the IntegrityFirst product into our lineup here. And Gary has been a longtime advocate of it, risk management consultant, insurance, work comp expert. So Gary, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I seem to focus on workers' compensation more than anything else. I always joke I try to get away from it, and I seem to get back at it, and seem to be pretty good at helping large companies reduce costs when it comes to workers' compensation. And I've been recommending and involved with the integrity testing for, it's got to be close to 20 years, making the recommendations on it, and then in more recent years, just more heavily involved in promoting the product. I love the product because, quite frankly, it makes me look good. If I'm trying to reduce claim costs, we always say that you just can't out safety a bad hire on that end of it. So about 30 years experience in the business, and I'll be walking you through this presentation as we go forward. So you want me to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, man. Let's do it. Just
Okay.
Posting this in the LinkedIn here and just making sure everybody can see it on the LinkedIn Live as well.
Okay, integrity testing. Just overall, we're going to get into a little bit more about what it is, but it's an online pre-hire assessment tool. It's used to screen out applicants with really high-risk behaviors. And typically, we're doing this presentation to employers. We may have some employers that are on, but in this case, our presentations are going to be focused on work comp are workers' compensation providers, such as insurance brokers, agents, insurance companies, captive program managers and captive managers, and just industry vendors. So we're taking kind of a different approach on this, but just understand that's where it's coming from. If you are an employer, no big surprises here. We'll be explaining the product in more detail. It's interesting as I had this quote just recently from a very successful insurance producer. He goes, since COVID, it's harder to get prospects to meet, to look at new ideas or consider brokerage relationships unless there's significant pain. So what we're finding is just harder and harder just to get in the door on businesses, to have them pay attention to different things out there. I think this tool is something that can really help you. So what we're going to try to demonstrate is on this tool is we can help you improve the results for your clients in terms of reducing workers' compensation costs. This can be used to create new business opportunities and improve client retention, and also improve effectiveness and efficiency of existing risk management resources. This is a incredible study that was done by Travelers Insurance Company, who's probably they either are the largest or one of the largest work comp providers in the country. They did the study. In the first page of the study, they focused on what we call new hires, people that have been employed less than 1 year. What they found is 34% of workplace injuries occur in the first year somebody's been on the job. And then to the right, you can see in some industries, it's much higher than 34%. And they look both at the number of claims as well as the actual claim costs in some industries as high as 50%, which is very significant. Now, I have
some of the riskier ones, a lot of the frontline, heavy logistics, hospitality, construction, those types, right?
Yeah. And we're seeing so very significant upfront. And I have a safety background, and the first thing we think about from a safety standpoint is, well, these new people aren't trained properly, or these new people, they weren't conditioned, they haven't worked around the equipment, they're new to the job on that end of it. But if you look at this, where I highlighted here, this is regardless of industry experience. So it isn't the person that doesn't know how to do the job, or is brand new to the job and isn't conditioned to the job. Something else is driving it, and we would suggest integrity is a big part of it. And so a lot of times I'll talk about employers seem to be trading, I call trading headaches. We have a new hire, they cause a problem, they end up terminated, they go somewhere else, somebody else hires them, and a lot of times we're just trading some of these headaches back and forth. This is a slide I put together, and Fletcher and I had a discussion about this because it was interesting. I've got a large account that I had been working with for about 10 years. And we originally started by helping them with how they manage claims, had great results, 30-some% reduction right off the bat. Then we weren't getting the same results a few years later, and we implemented a lot of these things you see on the left here side of the chart. Safety training, site visits, OSHA tracking, inspections, claim reviews, claim audits, return to work. We really implemented a lot of these programs, had some success in implementing those programs. And then due to management changes and some of the issues around COVID, a lot of these programs had fallen by the wayside. Just we're not getting the same support as we had in the past. However, at the same time, we implemented integrity testing into this client, and it was interesting. We got similar results. So if you look, just implementing this tool, which is once it's implemented, it's just put in the process. It doesn't require a lot of management effort or time, versus everything on the left there requires ongoing training and ongoing. You have issues with turnover and all kinds of issues, and a lot of labor, a lot of travel on that, but we got about the same results. Now, I'm not suggesting doing integrity testing versus those things on the left. What I would suggest to you is that if you combine the two, you get actually better results. And like we say, is you just can't out safety a bad hire.
Well, and I think this is a really important, conversation piece, Gary, because I mean, we see this. I mean, I come from a hiring, a talent performance, let's hire the very best people. Let's create the best organizations, best cultures. And, we hear this from HR people all the time. You hear it from risk management professionals. You hear it from CFOs. You hear it from CEOs, right? Where we're like, we don't have the bandwidth to implement some of these really best practices that we know. Like, I mean, just take safety training for example. Like, we don't have the bandwidth to really implement and execute a truly effective safety training program. We're just doing the bare minimum, just trying to survive, because they don't have the leadership. They don't the leadership talent that they have doesn't have the bandwidth, right? They're being pulled in a million different directions. And the difference is, right, so a lot of these things here, on the left here, they require a considerable amount of effort to both implement and maintain and execute, right?
Without a question. It's funny because in this particular client's case, the buyer at one time told me, said, Gary, even if I absolutely agree with you and I love the product we were talking about, he goes, who would implement it? How would I even do it? So exactly what you're saying. It's just, they require more. And it's interesting to me, a lot of companies I work with, senior management really does care and wants to do the right thing, but we lose it sometimes in middle management, and it just doesn't get carried through, and it just takes constant, work at it. It's not just a one-time thing.
And we see this a lot in the healthcare and the senior care space. I just read an article, like there are 600 less senior care facilities in the United States than there were before COVID. Think about that. So our population is aging. Our aged population who needs this type of care facilities has never been greater in the history of mankind, right? And there are less facilities to service these people. You can only imagine these facilities are completely overwhelmed, right? And integrity testing is huge in senior care and healthcare. It's the work comp issues that those folks deal with is huge. So that's why I kind of bring it up.
It's a challenging industry in many regards from that, and really challenging from the labor force. It's a tough job and not highly paid, especially in the lower levels.
Yeah.
One of the buzzwords right now in workers' compensation is it's behavior health, and this was a quote by Joe Paduta. He's got a blog and does a lot of work with healthcare and workers' compensation and actually investments in those industries. But he goes, there's a growing recognition that medical issues aren't hindering recovery nearly as much as psychosocial issues. So there are these other things that really impact the outcome of claim. I used to call it the character of the employee as a big impact on the cost of a claim on that end of it. Now, we've been building programs to deal with some of these issues across the board with all employees to prevent them from kind of falling through the cracks and getting lost in the work comp system, and they're very successful. But a lot of this is we're hiring people with many issues. And I've kept this quote now for over 20 years. It was from the president of a drywall contractor, which he kind of restates just what we heard there. He goes, Gary, it seems like personnel problems become work comp problems. And a lot of people, I will mention that to, employers will nod their head, and bad employees sure make terrible claimants. And so, but I thought this is just really relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So let me back up here a minute. I have a large account a couple of years ago was doing a marketing. They had about a $5 million program. Their losses were terrible. And so this was their premiums were doubling. So it was a $10 million program. And they decided they wanted to have a new insurance market relationship and they went out and they were very interested in the risk services and things that the carrier could provide, and how they manage claims and everything on that. So there were 7 major carriers that were very interested. Started with a lot larger number, but 7 that it was kind of narrowed down to. 5 of these insurance companies came out with their full team and presented. So everybody from underwriting to loss control, safety, claims, analytics, and they brought their teams out to present. And it was more of an interview, really trying to figure out who would be the best match. From a risk management presentation standpoint, I'd have to say it was kind of pedestrian. A lot of them sounded the same, and they brought up some of the same old cliche kind of things that they were doing. However, 4 of the insurers brought up integrity testing, which is, again, it's a product that I've been recommending for years, and I was excited that they were bringing it up. But as they went into it, none of them could really talk to the subject. They just didn't have the experience. They know they have it, they know they recommend it, but they don't know how to really get it, beyond first base. They don't know how to get it to the next level. And what's interesting in this company's case, 70% of their claims were coming from new hires. And now the insurance markets were given all the loss information, given everything to kind of tell us how you would help us. And the 4 of them actually, they brought up integrity testing, and none of them really identified how to sell it. So part of what we're trying to do today is to help, workers' compensation providers, give them the tools and understanding, or help them out as they have clients and prospects out there. We try to help you kind of work through this because we have the experience to help you get the product in place.
Are you going to address, so like when you have a 70% of your claims are coming from, or 70% of your costs are coming from people under 12 months, why is integrity testing such a great tool to combat that particular issue?
Yeah, good point. I kind of brushed over that, and we'll probably hit it some more. But when I work with a large employer, if 20 or 25% of claims are coming from new hires, then I always recommend integrity testing, because it's taking care of issues that I can't solve with safety or claim management, or are complicated by that. If it's 30 and 40%, without question, you're looking at 70% of your claims coming from new hires. You're hiring your problem. And
yeah, I mean, so the data is just saying clearly you are hiring people who are predisposed to becoming a work comp claim. And that is a complicated matter, but forget all the complications like the why. The facts, the data squarely point that, hey, this is the source of your problem, right?
And that's where we're getting at. So for me, at 20%, it becomes absolutely, again, I know I'm going to get, whenever I do a study, I know I'm going to get results. It's kind of funny. I had one insurance broker recommend it on a client, and they were all excited and ready to buy it. And I looked at the losses, and it was 1.6% of their claims were from new hires. And I go, I love the tool. It'll help you with turnover, but it's not going to help you in work comp. But if you start seeing 20% or even 15%, this is a tool that you're going to see results in workers' compensation on that end of it. Now, outside of workers' compensation, this tool helps you in many other areas. Turnover is one, and we'll touch on that here in a minute. So a number of years ago, just before COVID, at National RIMS, they did an integrity testing presentation, and it was well received. And in the audience, they had the magazine people there, and they interviewed 3 industry experts that were out there for the presentation. And I know all 3 of these individuals personally, and all 3 of them basically said in the article, we love the product, but we can't get their clients to buy it. And they were blaming HR, because HR, they approach it from a risk management standpoint, but they're just saying that, we have a hard time getting HR to buy it. And part of the reason, in my belief, part of the reason is we're just not as comfortable when we start talking about things like turnover and other issues. If you're like myself in the property and casualty environment, we're thinking more, risk management, safety, and those types of things. When you start jumping over into human capital, we're just not as comfortable in it. So just to kind of emphasize the point, I put together a little document. And I'll do this when I'm working with a lot of brokers, because they don't really understand the impact of turnover costs on an organization. So here's just a description or a diagram to show you the impact this can make. So I'm using the example of 1,000 employees with a 50% turnover rate, which means they're hiring 500 people a year. Now, you can just take away a zero, and you can say it was 100 employees and reduce the numbers on it. But here's the point: in the industry, across all industries, it's accepted that the average turnover cost per hire runs around $3,800 for a very low wage earner. And it really varies by industry in situation. I've had manufacturers tell me it's more like $60,000 for a loss of a good production employee. But I used some examples here. So kind of a low estimate is $3,800. I saw a study Cornell put out for restaurant frontline workers is $5,864. And I recently did a program for a company where the industry average was $8,500, just to give some perspective on this. So again, going over to on the left side, we have $3,800 per employee. Hire times 500 is $1.9 million. If the integrity testing product that we're talking about, IntegrityFirst, on average reduces turnover costs by 30%, you can see that that would be $570,000 in cost reductions. And I'm using the example, the cost varies depending on some other circumstances, but if it was $50,000 was the cost of integrity testing, that would be a net ROI of 1,040%. So if you look across, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to point out a couple of things, because you're using some really good numbers, and I have some pet peeves about some of these numbers, but these numbers you're using in terms of the turnover cost per employee, those are hard costs, guys. Like fixed hard costs, sunk costs, right? That is not considering the lost opportunity cost. If you have a warehouse driver, say you have a delivery driver, they're delivering to people's homes, couches, or whatever, right? They're creating on average, let's just say $5,000 a day in revenue. We did this with a concrete company. Talking to the guy, they're delivering like $10,000 to $20,000 worth of product a day. Every day that truck sits unoperated, the 1 week, that's $50,000 in lost revenue. Right? So this is a very conservative set of numbers you've got here, Gary, right? I just want to point that out, that there's even more to the story, right?
There is. And so my biggest point is to understand that turnover costs, the idea that if you could cut turnover by 30%, what that means to the CEO, CFO, and HR is huge. And again, we have a tendency, property and casualty guys, to not look at this area of it. The funny one is, I use this $3,800 example for a national janitorial company. They clean buildings. So it was the chief operating officer. She was kind of looking a little skeptical, and I go, okay, let's cut it in half. Okay, it's a 520% ROI. Okay, let's cut that in half. And she just kind of laughs. They went ahead and bought the product and put it in place. And it did a study, phenomenal results. But the point I'm making here is, from a cost standpoint, you can't argue. I mean, from a return on investment, I don't know another investment where you could get that kind of return on it.
Well, and by the way, I did the math. I mean, for a situation like this, they'd pay $15,000 a year.
Okay. I'm conservative, okay?
Yeah, I know, I
I'm
know.
risk
I just want to.
management background, okay?
We're just going to do the exercise of keep cutting it in half, keep cutting it in half, and I mean the ROI is just ridiculous.
Yeah, you're not going to get it. So, and by the way, nobody doesn't buy it because of cost. I mean, it's just not an issue if you believe and understand the income. Anyways, so we talk about challenges with
Well,
HR.
you can ask
Um,
HR what are their core values in their company, and I'd be hard pressed to find any company that doesn't cite some version of integrity as part of their core value.
Without question, without question. So what is overt integrity testing? Okay, it's an online pre-employment assessment. Takes less than 10 minutes to take. I think it's 8 minutes and 40 seconds on average. It's 54 questions, fifth grade reading level, bilingual. You get instant results. As soon as they take the test, you can go online, you can see whether they were qualified or unqualified. The results are qualified or unqualified. If they're unqualified, you don't proceed further in the hiring process. Again, this is done early on. And unlike drug testing or background screening, you have to share the results. And this is done upfront. You don't share the results with the applicants. So it's quick, it's early, it's upfront, and it saves a lot of time that you spend with applicants that really shouldn't have out there. Question that everybody's going to think about, well, EOC, is it compliant? EOC requires that the test be either non-discriminatory or validated to be compliant, and IntegrityFirst is both. And the test is reviewed by universities on a periodic basis from that to make sure it's non-discriminatory on that end of it. So overall, why do people use it? Well, overall, if we looked at all the statistics, on average, we found a 48% lower claim frequency, 19% severity, and 30% reduction in turnover. So these are huge numbers. I have a tendency, I focus more on claim severity in the dollars and cents, and I typically do better than the overall average on this, and that's because of what I do is I'm doing integrity testing at the same time I'm implementing other risk management type programs, and so the combined effect is even greater. Some studies, just interesting results to share with you. This is a large company. They do some of the labor in airports around the country. They implemented this tool. They were having issues, and they were measuring employee retention by how many employees make it a year. And prior to doing the integrity testing, it was 18%. After putting this tool in place, it became 49%. Huge impact on costs. They also looked at all kinds of other things in terms of attendance. Did they leave after the contract, failure to return, quit without notice, resign without notice, or violating company policies. Again, they measured this stuff. They provided us the results. Just very favorable results. And this is one of my favorite studies was done. It's a blind study. It will probably never be repeated. It shouldn't be repeated. And the issue is we have a client who signed up to do the integrity testing, but they didn't look at the results. They didn't look who was qualified or unqualified. They did it for a year. We didn't know they were doing that. So they hired everybody, regardless if they were qualified or unqualified. And at the end of the year, they went back and said, well, let's look and see if this test was really valid. Well, we don't recommend it, because if you do this test and somebody says, yes, I do drugs at work, or I use cocaine and driving, or I steal, not a good thing to have that knowledge and not do anything about it. So regardless, the turnover rate for the qualified employees was 25%, or 65% for unqualified. So 2.5 times better. 98% of the candidates qualified were graded as either A or B by their managers. Terminated employees usually terminated for the reasons why they're unqualified. 75% of at-fault accidents were committed by those who are unqualified. Unqualified candidates much more likely to quit without notice. The only injuries that became work comp claims were turned in by the unqualified. So significant results on this. And again, independent, they provided the data to us. We look at different types of tests out there. There's covert or personality type tests, and then there's overt, which is self-admitting. And so I'm just going to share 4 questions to give you an example of what's on the test. Excluding pills you got from a doctor, prescriptions, which of the following drugs do you use? And you can see the questions that you need to answer. I'm just going to move one thing over here. Excuse me. Next question, have you ever pretended to have a work injury in order to collect workers' compensation? You can see the answers, never, once. I've only done it twice. I'm not like Fletcher. He does it. He's done it many times. He likes to surf. And so look out when the surf's up. He's probably going to fake a claim.
Definitely calling out sick.
Yeah, there you go. How often have you hit someone in anger in the past year? Now, hostility is you have to answer, some different questions. There's an algorithm built into it. But we took the test once with a group of 17 people, and we tried to fail, and we didn't fail, and we felt kind of bad. So if you fail for hostility, I'm telling you just don't want the people out there. And it's a 1% fail rate for hostility. I don't care if it's white collar, blue collar, what part of the country. It usually comes in right at 1%.
Yeah.
And then how often have you?
Oh,
what's that?
I was just going to point out. I mean, there was the farmer in Northern California, the guy at the bank. I mean, these workplace shooting things keep coming up over and over again.
They do. A real issue. Well, and then you look at industries like in healthcare or senior care, you're sending somebody in their home and you're dealing with people with, memory issues and things of that nature that are hard and frustrating and to work with. And and so then if you put somebody in that environment, it's just not a good scenario.
Yeah.
Then the last scale we're going to talk about, this question gets in, we call faking, or they just can't tell the truth. And in this particular area, you have to get 14 questions. You got to get all 14 wrong. And here's an example of the question would be, how often have you told a lie since age 16? Well, if you say, I've never told a lie, I've never been angry, I've never, you got to do it 14 times. You are either lying or you got other issues, and we probably would recommend hiring this person. But so that gets at that scale. So why would somebody answer these questions? They're applying for a job. Why would they admit they use heroin, or why would they, admit to theft and things of that nature? And the term for it is called cognitive dissonance. We just simply rationalize risky behaviors as normal. Everybody steals this much money from their employer. Everybody does these things. And so it's easy to say, well, how can that be? And I was using an example of speeding. Now, speeding is not on the test. The test is only for applicants, not for existing workforce. But anyways, I know speeding is wrong. I drive above the speed limit, especially on the highway. I know it's wrong. I know it's against the law, but I'll admit to it. And many people will. But I use that as an example of why these people would admit to these other high-risk behaviors.
Well, why do you admit to it?
I've rationalized that it's okay in my mind.
Yeah, because
everybody.
Everybody I know speeds. Everybody does it, right? Like, it's normal. Like, in fact, if you're not, like, maybe you're kind of like, you're a problem. Like, if you ask my wife, if you're not driving 10 miles over the speed limit on the highway, then like get off the highway, according to her.
Yeah, and if you're in that left lane, you can't even. Don't get me started, okay?
Yeah,
and you're driving slow.
Yeah, don't be driving 65 in the left lane.
No. So but but again, that the point is people will admit to these behaviors.
That is cognitive dissonance, Gary, though. That conversation we just had, that's it. And that's the conversation
That's
that
it.
heroin addicts have, that potheads have, that people who steal from their employers have with their friends and their family and their colleagues and their coworkers. And it sounds just like that. Hey, my boss is a jerk. You know what? It's okay if you take that $500 drill home with you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that on the theft scale, the highest reason they fail is for admission. They admit $500 or more.
Yeah.
That's pretty shocking on that end of it. So across the board, 5% fail for drug use. Again, when it comes to marijuana or even alcohol, it's asking about being impaired at work from that, so they meet the different law changes regarding marijuana and whatnot. 8% theft, 12% on faking, 1% on hostility. So 23% of the applicants usually are disqualified.
Almost
Now, I
exactly.
have a study I did. This is a very large study, but it's really interesting results. And so this is a very large healthcare company. The study involves 5,000 claims and over $40 million in losses. So this is a really large group, okay? Before they did integrity testing across the board, 33% of the applicants, of the incurred costs came from what we call new hires, employed less than 1 year. So that was the reason we did it. We did a pilot first. We had great results, and then they rolled it out everywhere. So they just rolled it out in the middle of rolling out everywhere, 6 to 8 months into the complete rollout after the pilot. With the heart of COVID, they had issues with employees not wanting to get vaccinated. They were in the healthcare industry. So they paused the program. So in this study, not only is it large, but we get to see before integrity testing, after putting it in place, and then after pausing or stopping integrity testing. So the group, the overall group for even the pilot people and the other locations overall, before testing, 33% of the cost came from new hires. After implementing it, and again, it had only been implemented fully, for all locations for about 6-8 months, it dropped to 18.2%. And after they paused integrity testing, it shot up to 38.4%. And then we looked at just the pilot locations. They started out higher at 35%. After they did integrity testing, it dropped to 23.5%. And then since they paused the integrity testing, it's jumped up to 60%. I am seeing in today's market or in today's time period, the percentage of people hurt in their first year of employment has increased significantly, which is probably the reason why travelers in their study is really pointing to that. So, and I also find it interesting is before doing integrity testing, large group here, they're at 33.1%. Well, the traveler study was at 34%. Okay, when we looked at it across the board.
Yeah.
So again, we gear this towards people that are providers in work comp, it'd be insurance companies, brokers, and consultants. I'm not going to go through this in detail. All I have to say is we will help you in any way we can. If you're interested in this product, if you're interested in getting it in front of your client, we'll work with you before if you have a client you think this would be good for, have a discussion, give me a call, we'll talk about it. We'll ask for some information. If it happens to be one of your clients and you already have their loss information, you already know whether they're a good prospect or not, depending on what percentage of the costs or injuries are from new hires. And we'll help you with building an ROI model like we have here. It's funny, for one insurance company, a broker, we've got a senior level loss control person. He introduces it to the client, then he comes back and says, okay, do your thing, put together the model for me. And we've been very successful with that on that end of it.
And
so it's, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just mention, like, I threw your email address in there in case anybody wants to talk to you. I mean, Gary does, full analysis of work comp programs and works with brokers and insurers, right? I mean, so it goes beyond Integrity First, but obviously, that's, you feel free to reach out, and, Gary helps, brokers in all different ways, right? And then also, we just threw in a link to the Integrity First test website. So if you can just revisit and see these stats, and there's case studies and all sorts of stuff in there. And then as well as a link to schedule a call if you want to learn more about the program, or if you're an employer on the call and you want to learn more about implementing, you can schedule a call with us and talk about it too. So I just want to mention that's in the chat there for everybody before people start to sign off here. So sorry to interrupt there.
Well, you hit on on slide. This is really the model that I use. I focus on dollars and cents, but also get involved in Ocean and looking at people that are worried about the experience mod. I really look at everything from management to the safety. What do I see out there, to the claims, and then I break claims down to the employer and return to work and that type of thing, to the insurer, TPA, and then just the different vendors. And then human resources, human capital is a big area that I focus on. I highlight integrity testing. Again, my issue is sometimes we make bad hires. They either get hurt more often, claim they get hurt more often, or are very frustrating to deal with on that end of it.
You've got like 40 things in your model. And if you go back real quick, under just the hiring process, if anybody's interested, I mean, I have there's about 40 different things that you've got to do in the hiring process just to be successful there. And so there's we have a hiring academy that we share with folks. And if you reach out to me and you want a free copy of it, or a copy of our book or something, otherwise you can buy it online. But there's 40 points in that model too. So just how complicated it is. And it goes back to like that scale image that you showed, right? Like you have all these things. Again, I mean, just in hiring, like I'm an advocate, like you need to be doing all these things correctly. But if there's one thing that can make a huge impact that's easy and inexpensive to implement, it's just a simple 7-minute integrity survey.
Yeah, and that's for me, I can look at the numbers, can look at it, and I can know ahead of time I'm going to be successful with a client. And so it's exciting for me from that end of it.
Yeah.
So do we have questions, or any chat questions or anything?
Well, maybe okay, no questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
So, if anybody has any questions, obviously I drop links on how to get in contact with us, whether it be Gary or with us, to learn more about integrity testing. Any questions pop up, we're more than welcome to answer those. And the recording will send out to both everybody who joined. So if you have colleagues or clients or anything you want to share this with, or if you want a one-pager or anything you need supporting wise, we have videos, one-pagers, website, the whole 9 yards. Anything you need to share with clients, or if you're a HR person or risk management person, you want to send this to your CFO or CEO, or any of your counterparts and your executive team, happy to connect and get you any sort of supporting material that you like. So feel free to reach out. And we always appreciate people who tune in and join us on these calls, and something that Gary and I are super passionate about. So
Thank you for your time.
awesome. Well, Gary, I'll be in touch as usual. We'll catch up, and enjoy your holiday weekend.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.